Welcome to our deep dive. We're tackling microservices architecture today, and it seems like you're really keen to dig beneath the surface.
Yeah, it's more than just a buzzword, right? It's reshaping how we think about software.
Totally. We're going to explore how this impacts everything, from how teams work together to, well, the future of software development. So to set the scene, imagine you're trying to fix a tiny part of a giant robot, but everything's tangled together.
Oof, yeah, sounds like a nightmare.
That's a monolithic application, one massive code base. Now, picture that robot built with modular parts, easily swappable, upgradable, you name it.
Okay, I'm starting to see where you're going with this.
That's the beauty of microservices. Each one is like its own self-contained unit, taking care of a specific thing.
Yep.
Think like a ride-sharing app.
Right, you'd have one for user accounts, another for payments, another for dispatching rides.
Exactly. And this is where domain-driven design comes in, DDD for short.
Essentially aligning your software with your business functions, right? Breaking down those monoliths into more manageable services.
Well, how do you make sure those services are the right size?
Yeah.
Too small, and you just create a different kind of mess.
It's a bit of an art finding that balance. We call them bounded contexts.
Yeah.
Big enough to be meaningful, small enough to wrap your head around.
Like organizing a kitchen, right? You don't want one drawer for everything, but you also don't need a separate drawer for every single spoon.
Perfect analogy.
Okay, but here's where I get tripped up. If all these microservices are doing their own thing, how do they actually talk to each other, like a team of chefs who can't share ingredients?
Ah, now we're getting to the core of it. How these independent services actually work together. Sometimes it's real time, like updating your social media profile. That's synchronous communication.
Immediate response, got it. But what about things that happen in the background, like sending an email?
That's asynchronous, like dropping a letter in the mail. You know it'll get there eventually.
Makes sense, but how do these microservices even find each other in the first place?
Mhm.
It's a big digital world out there.
Service discovery to the rescue. We use tools, think Console or Netflix Eureka. They're like digital phone books.
Keeping track of who's who and what's what.
Exactly. And just like a well-run office, we need to make sure everything flows smoothly, even when things get hectic. Which brings us to the challenge of managing potentially hundreds, thousands of these microservices.
That sounds incredibly complex. How do you keep it all running without, like, an army of engineers? All right, so we're picturing our software not as this tangled mess, but a well-organized system of microservices, each doing its own thing. But with all this talk about digital phone books and chefs, how do actual human teams fit into this whole thing?
That's the question, isn't it? It's easy to get lost in the tech, but the real magic happens when we connect it to like how we actually work together. Remember our robot analogy. Imagine each part of that robot, each module, built and maintained by a dedicated team.
So instead of one giant team, you have smaller, more focused teams with their own areas of expertise.
Exactly. And that's where Conway's law comes in. The idea that our software structure kind of mirrors how we communicate within an organization. Microservices can help us break down silos, create teams that are more, independent.
That sounds efficient. But wouldn't those teams become like isolated islands, each with their own language? How do you stop that from happening?
There's the balance, right? Give teams freedom, but make sure they're on the same page. Communication is key, obviously. Clear boundaries, shared coding standards, that kind of thing. Think of it like a jazz band.
Okay, I like this.
Each musician can improvise, do their own thing, but they're still listening, still in sync.
Finding that sweet spot between autonomy and cohesion. So it's a cultural shift as much as a technological one.
You got it. It's a shift from me to we, from focusing on your little piece of code to seeing how it fits into the whole system, how it impacts others.
Shared ownership. I like that.
Oh.
But let's be real for a sec. We've talked about the good stuff, scalability, flexibility, but there's got to be downsides, right?
Well,
what are some things people don't always see?
Oh, for sure. It's not all sunshine and roses. One thing is the complexity of managing a distributed system. You have all these services talking over a network. It's not so simple. You have latency, the possibility of things failing, and making sure your data is consistent across everything.
So it's not just about breaking down a monolith and calling it a day.
Nope, not at all. You need the right tools, a deep understanding of how distributed systems work. We talked about service discovery, orchestration, but then there's monitoring, debugging. It's like finding a faulty bulb in a string of 1,000 lights. You need a new approach.
Great analogy. Observability is key then.
Absolutely. You need ways to track what's happening, find bottlenecks, fix problems fast. And speaking of challenges, let's talk data management. That's another area where things can get, well, interesting.
Yeah, data all over the place. How do you even keep track of it all? So we're back, and I gotta say, thinking about data spread across all these microservices, it's a bit like, I don't know, trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle where all the pieces are in different rooms. How do you even wrap your head around that?
Yeah, it's a common worry, and honestly, there's no magic bullet. One way is to let each microservice own its data, keep it in its own little database.
Keeps things tidy, but then you've got to make sure it all still makes sense together,
Right,
right?
exactly. Like imagine different departments, each with their own filing cabinets. Works great until you need to connect the dots.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So how do you solve that?
Well, there's this idea called event sourcing. Instead of just storing, say, the current state of a customer's order, you keep a log of everything that happened to get there.
Like a history trail, so you can always rewind.
Exactly. Even if something goes wrong, you can trace it back, see the whole story. Plus, you can do cool things with that history, like build dashboards, run reports, without overloading your main systems.
So it's not just about fixing problems. It's about understanding what's happening on a deeper level.
Right. But like anything, it's got trade-offs. You got to think about data differently, and it might not be the right fit for every situation.
There's that theme. Again, microservices are about finding the right tool for the job, not just blindly applying a solution.
100%. Know your goals, know your limits, and be ready to adapt because technology never stands still.
So for our listeners, after this deep dive into the world of microservices, what's the one thing you want them to walk away with?
Stay curious, keep experimenting, and work together. Don't be afraid to challenge the way things are done and find new, better ways to build software.
Love that. It's about human ingenuity as much as it is about the tech itself. We've covered a lot of ground today, the building blocks of microservices, how they impact teams, and even how we manage data in this brave new world. It's been quite a journey, and I have a feeling this is just the beginning of our exploration. Until
Yeah.
next time.